All right, we good? Okay. All right, so my background is also in science and math, and so I have this really, really profound passion for what today is known as STEM education, back when science and math, especially as it pertains to girls and underrepresented populations. So that's a little bit about the passion of where some of the work you're going to see today comes from. So I was asked to be a principal of a school that was in a turnaround status 6 years ago. I didn't want to be a principal, and when the superintendent asked me, I said no. And he said, I think you should go home over the weekend and think about this opportunity. It was falling apart. It was the most violent middle school in our district. They were operating at a 30% deficit in their student population. Parents were petitioning for the boundaries to be redrawn so their students didn't have to attend the school, and it was a total disaster. I had been spending my years prior, myself and 2 other women, starting one of the first K-8 STEM schools in the country to serve kids starting at age 5. And it had gone really, really well. And then I spent another year in high school building a feeder pipeline into that school so that my 8th graders had a really cool place and great place to go to high school. So the superintendent, in all his wisdom, and I do love him, said, this STEM thing's going really, really great. Why don't you take a team? We have this disaster down south, and why don't you turn the school around and make it a STEM school? Right? Super easy. No problem. I got this. So I said yes, mostly because I thought, you know what, let's give it a go. So I say yes. This box of keys is on my desk when I walk in, along with a little note that says, good luck, hang tough, you'll be all right. I thought, what in the heck have I gotten myself into? The former administration had been so happy to get the heck out of town that they had not sorted any key for any cabinet, any door, any lock in the building. They were in the box. So I share this because it's a metaphor for my journey throughout this time in this building. Day 1, my custodians got in a fist fight and had to both be fired. Don't have a clean building. Day 2, I have an entire squatter community out back that has been there for almost a year, and they don't want to go anywhere. And school's going to start in less than 2 weeks. Finally, day 3, I realized that I had to hire 60% new staff because they saw me coming in and thought, heck no, I'm not working for that girl. She doesn't know our community. She doesn't speak Spanish. She has no idea who we are. We've been here a long time. We've been crapped all over by the district because they're going to close our school down and make it a new STEM school. We don't even know what that is. I'm getting out. So it was a revolving door of people saying, good luck, I'm quitting. So I thought, you know what? I could probably teach science and maybe run the school. I know that my AP could do this, and we were joking around about how it might eventually just be the 4 of us left. So failure is definitely a bruise and not a tattoo. The district, in all its wisdom, decided that every single middle schooler could stay. It was going to be a K-8 school, so they were going to bring in new elementary students, but every middle schooler could stay. They put some beautiful paint on the buildings, they changed the name, they put STEM in the title, and said to middle schoolers, come back in the fall ready to be a STEM student. You know what my middle schoolers did? They came back in the fall and they said, screw you, I'm still a middle schooler. I don't like to be STEM. I don't want to go to school with little kids. I don't know what the heck's going on. And they were really, really naughty. Like really naughty, right? Really, really naughty. This, school starts. Day 2 of school starting, this amazing young woman, 6th grader, is in my office. Half of her hair's been pulled out. She's got in a big fight. She's got a big bruise on her cheek. And she's mad. Man, she's mad. She's cussing at me. She's kicking things. I said, what in the world's going on? Well, they don't understand, blah, blah, blah. She said, look, they pull up social media. This is actually her handle in all of her social media. She's in 6th grade. So we start talking, and over time I get to know her because she's in the office a lot. And she shares with me that her mom's being deported, and she's going to leave her behind and take her younger brother. So 12 years old, she's going to be left to her own devices. She has no family in the US. She also feels like she doesn't belong, and she's the one that tells me the story about you can't put the paint on this school and expect us to be different. We don't even know what STEM is. You want us to be different, and we don't know how to be different. So this 6th grader was the one that helped me start the student journey and what needed to be different among my students and how I needed to change their identity and start talking about the way that they learn in a different way. I also then turned my sights on my staff. I did a lot of walking and talking and a lot of listening. And my first staff meeting, this is the very first slide I put up. Do you think I was very popular that day? No, right? I had hired everybody, thank goodness, back, had a full staff, and I said, I have walked this building, I've been in every single one of your classrooms, and I don't think that you actually believe that kids who are poor and kids who don't look like you can actually learn. Because I see zero evidence of that happening anywhere in this building. So if you don't believe that these students can learn, then I need you to get out. I'll find you a home somewhere else, but you have no business being in my building. It didn't go over so great, right? They were like, who is this woman? But they got the message, and they got the message loud and clear. And the most honest conversation we had that day was, we don't know how. We don't know how to teach them. We need help. We need resources. The other thing I want to share, I came to this school because something tragic had happened the year prior when I was at the high school working with them. The K-8 model had started, and this district had hired a principal from outside of the district. And she wasn't really into the STEM model. She kind of wanted to make a name for herself as a principal. Didn't really pay attention to a lot of the formal things that you need to pay attention to in leadership. And by the start of the school year, a first grader had been raped in the building by a middle school student. So as you can imagine, it's devastating, right? It's like death by newspaper. Parents are scared and pissed. They don't want their students to come back. The STEM model's bad. The K-8 model's bad. What are you doing? The only reason it didn't get any more press than it got was because they found Jessica Ridgway's body the same week, and it saved us from being in the paper over and over and over. It was horrible. So when I got to the school, and the staff that I had stayed on, they were traumatized. They had never had a chance or a voice to share what happened in their building, to talk about it, to mourn what happened, to say we had a role in this and we're sorry. They had no chance to do that prior. So a lot of our time spent together was about healing them and about making a promise to them that we were going to do better. Not perfect, but better. And I quickly learned, because I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a principal. I'm going to be really strategic. I'm going to have best laid plans. I'm going to do a bunch of work. Nobody cares that you put stuff in a binder or a folder or on your computer. I quickly learned that culture was the most important thing that I was going to have to work on. If I didn't start investing in human capital and professional capital, I was going to go nowhere fast, and I'd be another failed story. My school would be another failed story. So I started paying attention to culture. And it got me really, really far. When you're in education or in the fields that you all work in, time is a commodity. We don't have a lot of time. How many of you have piloted something for 3 to 5 years? Right? Yeah. We love the word pilot, right? Because it implies that we don't have to take in responsibility, that we can just blame the process if it doesn't work. Right? So I hate the word pilot. I like the word experiment because it actually implies something might actually happen. But we get paralyzed by wanting to pilot things because we're scared to take them on. And as Carrie said, we're scared to jump right in and finish. And so I didn't have my students didn't have time. I couldn't be a pilot for 3 to 5 years. I had to turn things around in a year. So this is how we measured a year. There's a lot on the screen. The biggest things that you need to know is that we went from turnaround status to performance in 1 year. We've maintained that performance status for the past 6, 7 years that they've been in existence. We went from having 1,500 office referrals for behavior to 23. We went from having the highest truancy rate at 92%, right? You guys can do the math. Like 6% of the kids are coming to school? What the heck, right? 92% truancy rate in the county to 22%. I didn't have time to drive around and pick all those kids up, right? We had to figure out a different way to do that. We didn't provide transportation. So the other things on here that I'm proud of is that we have kids who are running companies. They've started their own LLCs. They have patents pending for their work. That's the stuff that matters to me. We have over 2,000 students that are participating in work-based learning experiences young as 6th grade. They go to internships in major companies so that they can maybe decide what their pathway will be before they get
to the college level, the high school level. The other thing I want to share is that this was something that interesting that happened to me when I was working at the high school. So we see the shift in students, great, but there was also the shift starting to happen in educators. North Glen High School, where I was the year prior, had the highest grievance rate in the district. So you'd walk into a meeting and all the teachers would be sitting in their union colors and they'd be just ready to fight you, right? Ready to say, nope, not happening, we're not going to do it, not supporting it, it's not going to happen. And they grieved everything. I mean, you wanted to sharpen a pencil too sharp and they would grieve you. So after a year of implementing this model that I'm going to share with you today, this was the change in their disposition. They started to actually like their job. They started to kind of like each other, and they started to engage with students in a better way. So I knew that if I could do this at STEM Launch, we would have a shot as well. And then I think this is important. The model that we built had to have no exemptions. It didn't need to take a lot of money. It didn't need to be a special place in a special building with special equipment. It needed to be the same constraints as every other school in this country. Our first school looked like a prison. They cobbled together budgets from all over, and we opened with a third less budget of any other school in the district, and the superintendent said, you have 3 months to fill seats. If you don't, I'll shut you down. So we didn't get like this amazing budget, this amazing start. We were resourceful and scrappy. We weren't special at all. The idea here was that we knew that we had to think differently and act differently, but we weren't going to be special. We started to focus in on what does industry do? How is Google changing the workplace? How do companies communicate and collaborate and create products and interact with each other? And we started to look to industry for these robust models of ways that they were doing work and decided that we would mimic that. We would bring that into the K-12 space. And not in a weird, fluffy way, right? But in an actual, authentic, and relevant way. And we'll talk more about that in a sec. You guys probably all have your own definition of what education is for, based on your own experience, based on your experiences now trying to work with your education partners. This is our definition of what school is for, and I think it's worth sharing with you, because I think, and I hope, that it kind of starts to shift the perspective around the value of K-12 education, especially if we do it well. For us, the game became, you know what, academics do matter. Absolutely they do matter. It matter. I mean, if I didn't move the academic needle, I wouldn't have a job. So I know that matters, but for us it became about this economic trajectory. How can we start leveraging K-12 education to result in something more meaningful than just this next step idea, right? Graduate from high school, next step. How could we start to think about this differently? So today I want to share with you 3 N's that we put together. The first one is necessity. If I wanted my school to be a hub of innovation, it first had to become a community resource. Every day the school is being vandalized. Broken windows, graffiti, you name it, it was happening. And so I quickly realized that if we did not sort of become this value add to our community, they were never going to see us as part of the community. We were always going to be sort of this victim of circumstance. And so we started thinking about what are the needs that our community has and our students. And we not only have a full-time clothing and food bank on site, again, thank you to the Mortgage Family Foundation for helping connect us to their network and those resources. But also, we opened up the school so that we had beyond the bell programming. We fed kids breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we offered after-school tutoring and then clubs. So the building was open until 8 o'clock at night. I didn't have the budget to do that, so I said to my staff, if that matters to you, you're going to show up and volunteer and do it. And guess what? They all did. Because they knew if they put the time in, it would make a difference. When we fed dinner, we invited families in. You can come to the school and eat with your mom and dad, with your older brother and sister, your younger brother and sister. And so we started taking care of our community. The other thing is that I had a whole bunch of brand new teachers, and I love brand new teachers. They come in all shiny and new, and then we just beat the heck out of them, right? They leave the profession within 5 years. So I had a whole bunch of brand new teachers because that was the only people crazy enough to say yes to the job. And so they're sitting there the first week, and they're beaming, and they're excited, and they can't wait for those kiddos to come. And they came into our first staff meeting after the grumpy one, and there was all of these materials on a table, mountains of materials. They said, what are we doing? I said, you're going to make baskets, you're going to pair up into teams, and with our police and some of our community partnerships and nonprofit work, you're going to go out into our community and welcome kids back to school. You're going to go door to door and you're going to say, I can't wait for you to start the school year. I'm so happy for you to be at our school. And they were really excited about that. And I think they were a bit terrified about that. Most of my teachers don't live in the community that we serve. So they weren't aware of some of the problems and the issues and so where some of our students come from. So it served two purposes. One, it's freaking cool, right? To have your teacher show up and give you a jump rope and some chalk and movie passes and say, we love you and we're so excited for you to come and start the school year. That's cool. The other thing that it served was, selfishly, I needed my new shiny teachers to have some empathy and to begin to understand where our students were coming from. They needed to see what the home lives were like. They needed to make those personal connections and those relationships matter. So it served two purposes. Also, I quickly learned that if we were going to move the needle academically and start doing these amazing, robust models of ed, we had to take care of a few other things as well. I wrote 2 social emotional goals on my Unified Improvement Plan, and I went to the first principal meeting again as a new principal, and I shared them, and they said, what in the heck are you doing? Why do you not have a reading, writing, and math goal? That's ridiculous. That's not going to get you anywhere. And they were really upset with me. So I stuck to my guns, and I kept the social emotional goals on my UIP. We also started to engage our parent community, and so we started looking to our nonprofit partners to ask you all, how do we help upskill our parents? Because I had a community with a 300% increase in homelessness, and most of them were illiterate. And if they could read and write, then they certainly weren't STEM literate, right? They had a gap in their own career literacy. So we started using the school as a place to upskill our parents, offer classes for English classes, immigration attorneys, you name it, we offered it. We had first graders host classes for our senior citizens on how to use your smartphone, right? How to search on the internet and be safe, how to not get scammed. We also had our 5th graders come in and help their own parents build resumes and apply for jobs online and host job fairs. So we started to upskill our community. And then finally, we had distributive leadership. So the girl I was referring to earlier, eventually we got her to take down her slutty slut tagline, by the way. That was goal number 1, because that doesn't look good on LinkedIn. You get a lot of attention, but not the kind you want, right? So I started saying, if we're going to believe that we all can do this together, then we have to all be able to do it together. And so distributive leadership became a really big piece of this. I didn't want to be the sole leader of this building for lots of reasons, right? That's terrifying. But also, I needed my team. I needed some depth and capacity to my team because I needed this work to sustain itself, and I needed to create a way that could be leadership proof. If I walk away, I don't want what we've built to fall apart. So I needed to create capacity and depth to my team. I also had on my budget like 3 deans, because kids are really naughty and you have to have a lot of deans. And so I said, I don't need deans. I'm going to invest in mental health. I'm going to have a whole bunch of mental health professionals and coaches and coordinators to support academic outcomes, and then I don't need the deans. Because if you're doing really good and you love school, you're not naughty, and then you don't need a dean to talk to you every day, right? So we kind of started flipping what it means to have leadership in the building, and we created student ambassadors who basically run the show. And they were the naughtiest of the naughty, right? It's amazing when you hand a kid a polo and you say you're special and you're a leader and get your crap together, because I expect you to have your crap together. They rise to the occasion every single time. Every single time. And that's what we did. This is our mantra, because it happens daily. I'm the biggest klutz in the world. Half the time I'm usually falling down the stairs. One of my staff's favorite things was in the mornings I'd come in, and on the camera half the time I was slipping and sliding on the ice or falling on my butt. And so they were always looking for kind of the bloopers for me, right? We all have things that we fail at. I make mistakes all the time, and I'm the first to admit it. So the pivot part is the important part, right? You have to say, okay, great, what did we learn? How are we going to change it? What's next? Let's go, move it along. Okay, we got it, let's go. And this is where you all come in. If we were going to bring industry and our nonprofit partners into our space, we had to be a yes organization. Right now, schools are the biggest pain in the butt to partner with on the planet, right? It's hard to get into them. There's a bunch of bureaucracy. There's a bunch of rules. Sometimes they don't even know what to do with you when you show up unless you have something cool that they can take from you. So we had to start rethinking the way that we were going to partner with people. And we had to start saying yes, right? And the minute we started saying yes, we became the recipients of some pretty amazing things. So finally, under necessity, these are the big shifts. These are the things that start to happen when you pay attention to what people need. K-12 ed is so guilty of this. We apply a one-size-fits-all methodology to every single student. I had 925 kids. Not one of them is the same. So you have to move to a model of being responsive and personalized learning, okay? I quickly also realized that in education we like that win-lose. If I make this choice, I don't really understand the consequences of this. And we start to just look for like the hanging on method, right? I'll just get through and do this, instead of trying to galvanize the win-win. As Carrie mentioned before, the and model. How do I turn around a school and bring industry in and create jobs and help my community? I don't have to pick one of those. I get to do all of them if I have an and mindset. The work is really hard. Your work is really hard. And I always tell people, this is the biggest issue, is you get really excited about something and then you go back to the regular job and the regular work. My teachers would spend time together doing amazing things and then go back to the classroom and I'd see the same stuff that I had just talked to them about, not the best methodology. It's because we have this sense of reasonableness. We talk ourselves out of really great things. We talk ourselves out of innovation because it's hard and it's messy and sometimes it's really, really chaotic. And so you have to, as leaders, understand that for your organization, right? You have to understand that there's going to be mess and that it's not always going to be easy. And how do you lean into and lead people through innovation so that you get on the other side? And reasonableness might be a little voice in your head. It's really questioning some of those ideas, but isn't the driving force behind your organization and your development. The greatest piece that we could do in our community and that I work with organizations across the country to do today is to make the invisible visible. We had this sort of joke, right, where my admin team would come in one day and they'd say, are we going to pick up the rocks today and look under the boulders? Or are we just going to leave the rocks on the ground today? Right? Because sometimes when you pick up the rocks, you see a lot of stuff you don't want to see. There's like worms and roly-polies and, you know, it smells sometimes and it's weird. But if you don't pick up the rocks, you're not going to really know what your mess looks like, right? So if you make that invisible visible, you have to give kids a voice and a purpose and real work. You have to give teachers also a voice and real work. They have to feel connected. You have to give them agency and a way to show up every day and to do their jobs because they're so dang excited about what they're doing. And they're not just collecting a paycheck. You have to get them to that volunteer premium. And you do that by changing people's narrative. It's my second N. You start to talk and tell stories and change people's identity. And when you do that, that's when you'll get the change that you want. We're going to skip that one, actually. Okay. So I've been talking a lot about this model, and I want to share with you a little about the model. First of all, I don't think there's anything magical about it, and I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. This is just the way that we did business and the way that we continue to do business in our STEM and education world. And I think it's worth sharing with you because I think there's ways that our community and nonprofit partners really connect and will really make a difference in this work. So this is what I'd like you to do. You can choose one or you can choose both, but read these scenarios. And then with someone next to you, your friend that you came here with today, I want you to have a conversation here in a second. I'll put some questions up. So go ahead and read through these two scenarios. Okay, you have in your mind, right? Food desert, medical desert, recreation desert, or helium. We're good? So with your shoulder partner, talk about these three questions. The team got together to solve these. Who do you think was on the team? What skills did they need, and how viable do you think the solutions were they came up with? So hopefully that between your conversation you came up with at least some ideas, right? Some answers to these questions. Here's the reveal. So scenario one, 5-year-olds solve this problem. This is my favorite story. So our first problem-based learning experience was in kindergarten. 5-year-olds, right? They're the best learners because they're untethered, right? They have these amazing ideas. So 5-year-olds, through Google Maps, They see that they have a community that is not thriving. It is not healthy. Most of their food source comes from the convenience store down the street. Even the closest Walmart is pretty far away for their families. They also see they have no recreation district. They don't have a really cool place to go to do sports and swim and hang out. Most of the parks are not fun, dangerous after dark, don't have play equipment. Then they also realize that there's really not a medical, they're in a medical desert. There's 2 clinics that reside in our community. They're really poorly run and probably not a place that you'd want to show up to get medical care, to be quite honest. So 5-year-olds, through their social studies standards, we talk about communities ad nauseum in K-3 social studies, realized that they didn't have a healthy, thriving community, and so their charge was, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to fix it? So they got into teams with experts, with community experts like you all, and they started learning about the work that you're doing, and then they put some ideas together. And throughout this BBL, on the medical side, one of the ideas was we'll have a mobile medical care van come and serve our community. And we'll do the marketing, we'll tell our families, and they'll come and serve. And that was great. So the panel of industry experts adopted that idea. They loved it. It was the coolest day when 5 mobile medical care companies called and said, we can't wait to come and pitch to you. We have our presentation already. Can't wait to share with you what we're doing. And then they walked in, and they weren't pitching to me. They were pitching to 5-year-olds, right? So you have a setup like this with all these adorable little faces like, hey, tell us about your company. Nope, not good enough. We're not going with you, sorry, right? I mean, how cool. So they got to pick the mobile medical care company. Still to this day, twice a week, the mobile medical care company comes, they park outside of our school, and people line up for vaccinations and basic medical care. Very cool, yes, very cool. The helium one, right? That's intense. The other day, you talk about when it impacts the consumer, that's when we all pay attention to these things, right? The other day I was at the grocery store with my daughter, and she said, Mom, look at that sign, and it said, due to a helium shortage, we're no longer offering free kid balloons. Thought, what in the world? Okay, all right, this is real. So there is a helium shortage, in case you weren't aware, going on. And our 11th and 12th graders in our geology courses tackled this problem with local scientists and biologists and chemists to really think about how are we going to address this helium shortage and where should helium be stored so that as we build up our reserves, where should we store it? And they actually did a ton of really, really deep work on this problem, side by side with industry experts over about 4 to 6 weeks. And they came up with 3 possible sites in Colorado for helium storage. And the industries and the experts in the room chose one of those sites. And today there's actually a helium storage center being built based on these recommendations of these high school students to store helium in Colorado. So when I talk about authentic work, that's what we're talking about, right? K through 12, this is what my kids are doing every day. They're working on fracking. They're working on how to help families be more literate. They're working on when a huge flood or a natural disaster strikes, how can we be more prepared for that? What happens afterwards? They're working on these authentic problems. And it's all aligned to their standards. We're still following the rules, right? We're still doing our curriculum. Nobody's freaking out about that. I think bad things happen when you don't follow the math curriculum from front to back, but I promise you nothing bad happens to children if you don't. So this is the result of this model. You have kids in some of the poorest communities in America engaged in the most authentic and relevant work and learning possible. And they're working alongside you all. Their teacher doesn't have the answer. Do you think a first grade teacher really cares or knows anything about fracking? About nuclear energy? No, and they don't need to be an expert in that. They're going to learn alongside their students. They're going to figure it out because we're going to invite industry into the classroom. The other piece of this model that is my favorite is that when we start talking about economic trajectories, you have to start talking about employability skills. Having these essential skills was so important, and the model teaches that. When you come to school and you have to stand up in front of industry experts who care about what you're going to say, and you have to represent your idea with evidence, something inside you as a 5-year-old or a 12th grader or a middle schooler changes. They started dressing up. My boys started sharing ties because they didn't have ties. Instead of, my girls came in sometimes looking like they were going clubbing and not going to church. So we had to talk a little bit about how to dress for success so that you're not, your parts and pieces aren't distracting from your idea, and help them. But Nordstrom personal shoppers came in and actually helped them figure that out, right? So cool. So they started showing up. My favorite example of this is one of my naughty boys. He's in the office. He should have been suspended. He said, "You can't suspend me." I said, "Why not?" He said, "I go to panel tomorrow. I can't let my team down. Like, I'm here, I gotta go. Please, miss, please don't suspend me." And I said, "I'll in-school suspend you and you can still go to your panel." And he's like, "Okay, that's great." Right? I walked out of the office and I was like, that's the coolest conversation I just had ever, right? Please don't kick me out of school. Please keep me here so that I can present my idea to a panel. Because they know that these industry people care about them. When they're sharing their ideas, they feel important. It's like a rally cry for them. And so these skills, right, when you have to stand there, you have to shake hands, you have to look people in the eye, you have to communicate clearly, you have to work with the team and actually work with the team, not side-by-side play, not cooperation, not that culture of nice or culture of major conflict, but actually work and resolve ideas together, then these skills become really, really important. And I will tell you right now, this past summer, my high school students went to a summer camp with a whole bunch of affluent students, and they kicked their butt. And they kicked their butt because they got into a team. They weren't fighting amongst themselves and deciding who was going to do what. They got into a team, they got right to work, and their ideas rocked because they were not scared. They knew they could take the risk. They knew what to do with the materials, and they jumped right in. And you had kids who never would have thought they could do that, outperforming any other of their counterparts, and I was incredibly proud of them. So these skills are huge. I just have to brag on that a little bit because these are my kiddos, right? The other thing too is I want to mention is that the first years of being a principal, I realized that if I was going to walk my talk, I really had to do that. And if I was going to build an educational model with my team that would turn K-12 upside down, it had to be good enough for my own students, my own kids. So I took my children, all three of them, out of a really high-end private school up north, and I brought them to my school. And so two of my kiddos still go to school there. They love it. And the coolest thing, my husband was like, "Are you sure? I know you love your school, but are you sure?" Every day my daughter's coming home, right? The old school, talking about recess and homework and drama and who said what and what happened on the playground. And now you know what she comes home and talks about? Energy, efficiency. She unplugged all the appliances in her house. Like, not good, right? It's making a huge difference. I want to share this because I think organizationally, this is important. These are the norms that guide our work. And in education, we don't really like to talk about some of those things, right? In education, we like to talk about, I'll paraphrase what you say. I'll listen to you. I'll help you, right? Okay, well, that only gets us so far because the work is really hard. So these are our norms. These are also our norms at MindSpark Learning. This is what we hold each other accountable to. When we're in a conversation together, if someone is making excuses, you get to say, "Hey, stop," right? Stop making that excuse. Stop blaming that luck. Stop blaming other people. My educators were notorious at this. I can't teach those students. They can't read. It's not my fault, right? The bar was like right here. It wasn't up here. We keep wanting to dummy things down because they're at this level instead of figuring out scaffold and bridges up here. That had to stop. And when you start putting norms in that call out the BS, then that kind of work can happen. And then this is how we evaluate each other, excuse me, both on the staff side but also on the student side. And again, we continue this work today at MindSpark Learning. These are the 6 questions we ask each other. They're super easy. They're yes, no. So I'm going to be quiet for a second, and I want you to answer these for yourself. If you answered no to any of those are some gaps that you either have in your organization or on your team, right? It's a really easy way to identify those gaps. If people don't feel valued and connected to the work, these questions are going to make that very, very clear, very, very fast. You all know this, right? The world is changing very quickly, and yet our education system's not at all, right? Not at all. We try, but we're not getting it right very often. We also know this, right? The future is uncertain. And I know that it's education's job to help people with that uncertainty. People have to be comfortable with the unknown. My students have to live in that place where they feel uncomfortable, because that's the greatest place where learning happens. I just want to hit home this idea about these skills in terms of the economic impact, okay? When people are trying to get a job, this is what they're paying attention to. They actually really don't care what your GPA was or what kind of courses you took. They care about your experience. We have to give people the experience. The academic gap's important. My kids came on average 3 years behind. I understand the education gap, the academic gap. But we have to start talking about the experience gap. The greatest gift I can give my kiddos is a network. Carrie talked about the importance of a network. They have to have somebody to call upon to get that first job, to help mentor them, to keep them going. A lot of their families aren't going to be their role models. They're going to have other role models. And so by bringing industry into the classroom and co-teaching with my teachers, they were also getting a really strong network. You know, STEM is a fancy word. It's a PR hook. People like to talk about it. For us, it was this identity piece. It was our rally cry. I needed my staff and my students to feel special. So if by using the word STEM made them feel that way, then we were down. The work that I'm describing to you, the model that I'm sharing, is really called problem-based learning. So it's the idea that you get a rich, meaty problem from industry, you put kids in collaborative teams, they wrestle with that problem, they come up with viable solutions, and they pitch those viable solutions out to a panel of industry experts and get feedback. If their idea sucks, they kill it off and they go again. And they live in this kind of startup iterative process. What happens is, if the idea is really, really good, then two things happen. They launch a company or they start a nonprofit. So at second grade, we have a student-run LLC, right? We have students who are changing the world with their nonprofit work. So the girl that I started the talk with, she's graduating from college. She's actually an intern for us because I couldn't let go of her. She's doing great. She's doing absolutely fantastic. And she will tell you it's because she got to work alongside some of the most exceptional women in industry, starting in the 6th grade all the way through high school. That she had strong role models and she felt like she was cared about, even with the tough things that she was facing. The last end, and we'll go end here, is on our network, right? Carrie talked about the importance of a network. This industry connection to network is really, really important. I love this quote because it speaks so clearly to this notion of tribe and your squad and having your people around you that really matter, right? I would tell students all the time, if your peer group is bringing you down, you need a new peer group, right? It's not that difficult, but it's really hard for them to understand that until they start seeing that. The same is with teachers. Misery loves company. My students were naughty, but some of my teachers were really naughty too. So we had to start creating a culture where there wasn't time to be mad and grumpy. That if you're going to be mad and grumpy, it should be about the work and not about anything else. Our definition of partnership too, we don't ask people for money. We separate partnership and sponsorship. So when we engage you all, we're not coming to you for a grant or for money. We engage you all in partnership. Carrie and I knew each other for almost 1.5 years. I didn't ask her for any money. For a long time, we built this strong relationship. And then it was really important to me that when people did fund what we were doing, they weren't funding something essential to my program, so that they walked away at the end of the day, my program didn't fall apart. But they funded amazing enrichment and enhancements to what we were doing and made us better and more creative. And I think that's really important because schools do this drive-by thing, right? Come by and be a guest speaker. Drop off materials. Thank you so much. But they don't actually ever really truly engage you in the learning. This is our process. You could probably also put the word fear here too, right? And if you think about that, about the squiggle, in terms of your organization and your organization's development and your work, you can also overlay it with this one, right? And then here's the process, right? You have to live in that iterative cycle. You have to constantly design and test and go back and fail fast and pivot. And as Carrie said, you have to execute. You actually have to do something. You can't pilot everything forever. It'll never get done. Have porous boundaries, right? Take a risk. Say yes. Be unexpected, right? Surprise and delight people. If you have a mission and people know you for your work, that's fantastic, but try something a little bit different, right? When people walked into my building, the first thing they did not expect to see was a whole bunch of 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds greeting them and leading them for a tour around the whole building, right? They expected for me to come out and say nice things to them and shake their hand, right? They didn't expect the kids to lead everything. They didn't expect to work side by side with students. When we started this model, we had 5 industry partners around a table, and when I shared the model with them, they were super excited, and they said, great, we can't wait to start at high school. And I said, we're gonna start with 5-year-olds? And they were like, this is gonna be a really long-term partnership. I was like, yep, it is, and we're gonna grow and expand it, right? We started with 5, we worked to 35 partners, we now have over 465 industry partners. But be unexpected, surprise people. I also think that you have to pick your battles. And I love this image because when you start to poke holes in a model, you have to choose where you poke those holes, because eventually you're going to break down the integrity of the structure. And so as you start to reflect and be critical of your work, you have to start thinking about where can I afford to puncture that balloon and still hold its integrity, and where can I afford not to? Right? You have to be careful and calculate about those decisions you make when you decide to take a risk. Right? Nobody signs up for the unpleasant truths, right? Nobody does that. But I will tell you, this is where innovation happens. This is where entrepreneurship happens. This is where learning happens. This is where it's at. You are so much more creative when things are really, really hard and when there's tons of constraints. And as we think about community resilience and empathy, because students were solving problems that matter to them, they created this empathy in them. They could understand and seek out other people's opinions and have to do something with that information, so there became this overwhelming empathetic manner to our work. And overall, it built resilience. And finally, this is the outcomes. So right now, at MindSpark Learning, at STEM Launch, the schools that we work with, this is where we start. We ask people, ask organizations, where do you live on this continuum? What are you addressing? Every day if you show up, if you're just constantly working on symptoms, you're not going to get anywhere very, very quickly, right? You've got to start working on the causality, what's happening there, what are the root causes of what's going on? And we teach kids this in this problem-solving framework. We always want to solve things that are easy for us, right? The master schedule, the bell schedule, everything that the infrastructure of school should benefit the adults. We want our life to be easy. And when we start thinking about how to solve that for our students instead of ourselves, then things are different. They look different, and they may not feel good to everybody. So whether you adopt a problem-solving mentality or you blow up your organization and rebuild it, it doesn't matter, but I think what does matter is the idea that if you start thinking about how to create more empathetic and resilient employees and students, then you start to see behaviors change. And that's really, at the end of the day, what matters, right? Because if we can change our behavior, then really, really amazing things can be accomplished. So, thank you guys for your time today.